How are you guys doing? This is Aiken Story. I'm your host here. I want to talk to you guys today about the Breonna Taylor situation and why the officers who shot Breonna Taylor were not charged. I think it's just extreme foolishness that the officers were not charged. I mean, if you think of the whole story, officers went to their apartment with a no-knock warrant, bust into the door, and Breonna Taylor's boyfriend thought they were intruders, fired one shot at one of the officers. The officers went through the blinds, through the side, the sliding door, shot about 40 shots into the apartment. She gets hit by 6 to 8 bullets and dies. The neighbor said she was not given aid, so she dies at the scene. There were 11 neighbors who said they didn't hear the officer announce themselves. One allegedly said that he heard an officer announce themselves, and you have a grand jury that did not indict the officers on any charges relating to the killing of Breonna Taylor. They indicted the officers, one officer, with wanton conduct, wanton endangerment, should we say. And I don't understand why one officer is indicted for wanton endangerment with respect to firing shots that hit the neighbor's apartment, but Breonna Taylor, the officers were not charged for wanton endangerment with respect to firing shots that killed Breonna Taylor herself. That doesn't make any sense. And it's the same legal standard. Firing a shot with reckless disregard for human life, it's the same thing. So it makes you wonder, is there some ulterior motive with this Attorney General? And this Attorney General is a Trumper, it's a Republican, so you know he probably takes orders from who knows. So it doesn't make sense. And also the grand jury proceeding that he supposedly did. What evidence were presented in the grand jury proceeding? Did he even present evidence about the 11 other neighbors who said that they never heard the officers announce themselves when they busted the door in? And even if the officers, for example, say that they got fired upon by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, the Louisville Police Department have a policy: you can only fire with a line of sight. In other words, you have to see your target when you fire a weapon. You can't just indiscriminately fire 40 rounds into an apartment without a line of target, without a line of sight. Just keep firing. That is reckless endangerment. And I even think that the officers who fired the shots should have been charged with reckless homicide. Because reckless homicide under Kentucky law just means that you recklessly disregard a firearm without regard for the safety of people. And if the officer violated a department policy that says you can only fire a weapon if you have a line of sight, the reason they have that policy is so that officers don't indiscriminately fire shots into buildings or cars when there's no target, because that way you can just kill as many people. And the Attorney General that says that this was a justifiable self-defense, that is not for him to decide. He should have presented the evidence to the grand jury and let the grand jury decide what they were going to charge the officers with. But the way it appears that the Attorney General, Dan Cameron, did not even present this evidence to the grand jury and give them the charges of reckless homicide or wanton conduct with respect to Breonna Taylor. I didn't even think she even mentioned her name, and I'm thinking why would you not even mention her name? Because wanton conduct or wanton endangerment just means somebody engages in a reckless conduct that endangers another person under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. So it doesn't really make sense legally. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure other legal scholars will agree, that Why is it sufficient that the officers engaged in wanton endangerment with respect to the neighbors, but not with respect to Breonna Taylor? It doesn't make sense to me at all. And in the grand jury proceedings, you can get the grand jury to indict a Chick-fil-A sandwich, spicy chicken sandwich. And you know how hard that is to get somebody to indict a Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich, because that thing is so good, it can do no wrong. But you can get a grand jury to indict a Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich, but you cannot get a grand jury to indict these officers for this conduct. And the standard in the grand jury is a probable cause standard. It's so low. It's like more likely than not that officers engaged in this conduct. It's the same standard that officers have when they arrest people. They don't need that much to arrest you. A lot of times officers will arrest you and the charges get thrown out. But I don't understand why Attorney General Dan Cameron has not released a transcript of the grand jury proceedings. It doesn't make sense. And he claims because he wants to, I guess, cover the identity of the grand jurors. Well, you can still release a transcript and redact the names of the grand jurors. We don't need to know their names. We just need to know what evidence was presented to the grand jury, what charges was presented to them, so people can know if this was a fair proceeding, whether Breonna Taylor was fairly represented in that grand jury proceeding. There was no reason why Breonna Taylor is dead and these officers are not indicted if they indiscriminately fired 40 rounds or more into an apartment through the sliding door in violation of a department policy that requires a line of sight before firing. And the reason we have this policy is to prevent reckless shootings by officers. You can't just say that because they got fired upon one time, you're just gonna kill everybody in the apartment. That is not how it works. It's not safe. We cannot have a society like that. So, again, the officers claimed that they announced themselves. Now, if you're gonna announce yourself, why did you get a no-knock warrant in the first place? And the facts even surrounding getting the no-knock warrant, to me, were not even strong enough. But you know, that's the system we have. I'm glad they have banned no-knock warrants, and everything was just wrong in this situation. The boyfriend was as a legal gun owner, had every right to fire upon because he thought they were intruders. And from the 911 call the boyfriend made, he said that he did not hear anyone announce themselves. He didn't hear the officers announce themselves. And a lot of times, the 911 calls are very, very reliable because people give it to them after the incident occurs and people don't have time to lie. Unlike the officers, we have had a lot of time to rehearse their statement, to rehearse what they're going to say, to make stuff up. A 911 recording is usually reliable because it's right there. And so to me, it just questions the whole grand jury proceeding. I don't think it's fair. I don't see the legal sense in how you could get one officer indicted for wanton endangerment with respect to the neighbors, but not with respect to Breonna Taylor. And why not reckless homicide? And why not even present all the evidence to the grand jury and let the grand jury decide whether or not to indict? Because it's just a probable cause standard. More likely than not. At trial, it's going to be beyond a reasonable doubt, but they will have their day in court if they were indicted. But now that they were not even indicted, it appears that the evidence was not presented to the grand jury. And if I'm wrong, let the Attorney General release the transcript for everyone to see, to show what he presented to the grand jury, the evidence, the charge, the other 11 neighbors who said they heard nothing that the officers announced themselves. Were they allowed to testify? Was there any of that evidence presented to the grand jury? The Attorney General cannot just decide willy-nilly on his own that was a justifiable shooting when there's evidence to the contrary. That's why we have grand jurors. Anyway, let me know what you guys think. I think it's extreme foolishness that these officers were not indicted. I think it's also extreme foolishness that the Attorney General has not released any transcript. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think the officers should be indicted for shooting and killing Breonna Taylor? Do you think, even if it's not for first degree murder, at the very least reckless homicide, manslaughter, some lesser charge, but something? Well, what do you guys think? Let me know. If you haven't subscribed, please click the subscribe button, hit the bell, so that anytime I upload videos, you will be in the know. Ekins Doherty here, Mr. Making Pay. Remember, say no to extreme foolishness.